When something triggers you, you're actually at a point that you're ready and you're given an opportunity to look at it differently. The whole book is really about unconditional love. From the name it to tame it, instead of getting angry at that other person, you're turning inward. And it's like a baby step to unconditional love. Sending a bubble around someone else that just cut you off or endangered your family, right? You are saying, I'm not sure what's going on in your life, but I love you just as you are, right? I get.
All right, so welcome to Quantum Conversations. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Stephen Miller, author of Driving in Unconditional Love. Stephen's inquisitive nature and intuitive approach helps others explore healing and personal development. He has a background in electrical engineering, and less than 2 years ago, he discovered his abilities to see energy, scan people, receive vision messages for others, and see connections to past lifetimes. Stephen's views water as a profound teacher, guiding his insights on the essential flow of communication around us. He engages regularly with mentors from Washington and Ecuador, participates in spiritual circles, and is undergoing psychic and mediumship training. So living on 9 acres with 3 ponds he had built in Tacoma, Washington, Stephen is dedicated to developing and sharing his gifts, inviting others into a transformative journey of discovery and connection. So please join me in welcoming Stephen Miller to our show.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you.
There's so much just in that I want to talk about, like the psychic and
Yep.
the mediumship training. I didn't realize you were doing that, but I find that's fascinating. And speaking about the book, let's start with that. What
Yeah.
was your motivation for writing the book?
Well, the motivation was, it really started with just personal development. I noticed that when I was driving, I would get angry.
Mhm.
And there's like really angry. Like I would cut people off, I would do things that were highly dangerous. And when I was listening to a book where they talked about this concept of name it to tame it, it was really kind of the initial spark because at that moment I turned inwards. And name it to tame it is this concept that all of a sudden, let's say you get angry, but it's the moment that you notice that you're angry, which really aligns with me with sensing energy because it teaches you how to sense into your body and use your body as this great instrument to guide you. And the quicker that you identify something and you name it, right, then all of a sudden it's like it doesn't have the control it had before. It's not the outside world impacting you. And then you start to turn inwards
Mhm.
and things really change. And so that was the initial spark. It really was like, I don't know, kind of looking back, I'd love to be able to get to work without being angry or get home without
Mhm.
being angry. And through this process, I started to notice that it was making a big difference in me. And then when I shared some of the concepts with friends, they liked it. And so then I kept practicing. And now I include my kids, and it was just about improving myself in the beginning.
Mhm. Well, and I think it's so powerful because and I had mentioned this to you, like I don't identify as someone with road rage, but I wanted to buy your book and support you. And
Yep.
right away, when I started reading it, I just noticed how much I resonated with it. And I guess I just wasn't even aware of how I was driving and when I would be driving and I would be feeling angry. So it was kind of like what you said, name it to tame it, like
Mm.
just becoming aware of how many times I do feel that anger come up when I'm driving.
And that's that other beautiful concept. And I chose one genre of driving because it was the one where I got the most practice, because people do interesting things or I do interesting things, but you can apply it in other areas that trigger you. I
Mhm.
don't recommend watching the news, but if you want to watch the news and you feel triggered, you can apply these same concepts anywhere.
Mhm.
Could be a relationship that triggers you, it could be a neighbor,
Mhm.
anything that triggers you. Like these concepts apply all there. It's not just about driving, but driving was the easiest way for me to practice myself and
Mhm.
relay it.
Well, and driving is quite accessible too. Like until I became conscious of it, I do drive a lot. So being able to use some of your practices while I'm driving, I'm already there and it's taking that conscious approach. About the road rage, I want to read this passage from your book because I just thought it was so beautiful. And like I said, I don't always notice it so much driving, but really just bringing awareness to rage. So I'm
Mhm.
going to read it and then maybe you can kind of elaborate on this insight. So when another driver experiences road rage, they may not perceive you as a person. Instead, you could represent everything they loathe, becoming a target for the days or a lifetime's worth of pent-up anger.
Ooh, yeah, that gives me tingles. For me, there's like the concept of mirrors, right? Where y you'll mirror onto someone else something that's within you. And there's this really unique place where if you pause a little bit and you really consider that other person, while they see you as a vehicle, right? They overlay everything on top of you. That's how they mirror it back to themselves, right? Like if they're having a bad day or their perception is the world is not great, then what they'll be doing is they'll be looking for little instances that confirm that in their life. And there's this other like trigger point, right? Like someone could have had a series of horrible things that happened in their life. And whatever you did reminds them of that whole series. So in that single moment, even though you are just someone driving a red car, right? That red car represents to them every time someone in a red car had done that. So you get all the memory and it's applied to you. And you're thinking, why is this person being a jerk?
Mhm.
Right? And that that same concept goes across life is like everyone is in their own universe, right? And they have all these experiences. And when we slow down, we start to like it really helps in forgiveness because when we slow down, we start to understand that we don't truly understand the other person.
Mhm.
And we don't know what's happening in that moment, right? Like maybe they're rushing to the emergency room,
Mhm.
or maybe they couldn't sleep last night because their kid was up all night. And when we slow down and we open to those possibilities, our heart really opens and we become much more compassionate. And we see the world differently too, right? Like it's a lot easier to forgive. It's a lot easier to say, hey, maybe I just don't understand.
Mhm.
And so they do something, and maybe in the past you might have just like reflected back all that anger to them. And in that moment where you were the red car that triggered them, when you do something rage back to them, you just confirmed all of that.
Mhm.
Ooh, this is beautiful. In that moment, if you do something else, like maybe you provide extra space or you wave or wow, you smile at the person when they go by, right? You
Mhm.
planted a seed for them that might have shattered all of that rage, right? Because
Mhm.
now it's like, oh, it doesn't make sense. Why did the person in the red car smile at me? And you plant that seed of love into them.
Mhm.
And and so you're changing, well, that changes you definitely on the inside. Then all of a sudden your outside starts to represent that same thing and it cascades throughout life.
Mhm. That is so beautiful. And it really changes the way I think about driving. And I think the other thing I loved about your book is you give so many practical, accessible practices, exercises to do, like envisioning a bubble of love around your own car. And you can then imagine that bubble around their car that they are going to get where they need to be safely. And can you kind of speak to those practices?
Yeah, on the name it to tame it was the first part, but then there's a story. It was at a spiritual conference, and the speaker was Paul Siegel was talking about this one gal came up to him. She was on her spiritual quest, and she was trying to find worth in herself, right? And she didn't feel like she was making a contribution. And when he's like, okay, tell me what do you do, which is a beautiful way, right? Like have him open up. And she says, well, okay, right now my main practice is and she was a bus driver, when every kid comes on the bus, I bless them.
Mm.
And for me, that was like, it's so selfless, right? Like all you're doing is you're loving someone or you're sending love to someone just as they are in that moment. And so then I took that into my driving and I started blessing drivers, all the drivers. I remember like I'd see all the cars this way, all the cars going the other way. I'd bless all of them. Then my scientific mind jumps in and I was like, what if I could only bless one driver, right? Like which one would be the most impactful? I'm not saying you shouldn't bless all the drivers, but if you want to consider if you were only gifted every day just one blessing that you could give, um, I spent a lot of time on it, right? Like I'd be driving and I'd be thinking about it, and then it came to me, and that was I would bless the most angry, or at least from my appearance, driver, maybe super aggressive, honking, all of those kind of things. Because when I did that, right, that person's probably driving fast, they're
Mhm.
probably driving aggressive, and they're the ones that are most likely going to get into a car accident with many other people.
Mhm.
They're also going to be the one that is most likely going to trigger a whole bunch of other people. And if
Mhm.
I could put a protective bubble around them, that was like filled with love, and they got home safely, that means all those other people that they would have cut off also got home safely.
Mhm.
And there's this other, as I experimented with this, I started to notice too, is like when you put a protective bubble, you can set it, or it's all about intention, but you can set it up that it helps them to be like for their highest level of their highest good. And so their anger doesn't necessarily like go spew out to all the other drivers. And it's reflected back into them in a way like you could call it love, happiness, even just simple calmness, a way
Mhm.
that puts them into a place where they can be a higher level of themselves. I hate the word higher, but like in a place that they probably want to be.
Mhm.
As I started to do that, and I'll use a story that my dad gave me because I talked to my parents on the weekend and I started sharing like all the things. And my dad started experimenting. And before he went to sleep one night, he put a protective bubble around himself. He had one of the best nights of sleep. And then, interestingly enough, I saw a YouTube video that talked about sleep bubbles too. And it was like, it was all synchronicity. And the thing is that outside thoughts for my dad, right? Like he's in Vietnam, so there's still pieces coming in. And those thoughts just dropped away.
Mhm.
So he was just left in quietness, right? And he didn't have all that stuff running in his head. And he was just in a peaceful place that allowed him just to enjoy his sleep. And then as I place those bubbles around people, when I would do stupid things, like maybe I would turn without a turn signal, or I'd be like, oh, I didn't even check the mirror. There was no one there.
Mhm.
And then other drivers would get, they'd open up. And it doesn't mean it happens all the time. The universe sends me triggering things. There's one time I was driving, it was like, it was in a street, two lanes this way, two lanes this way, but it was supposed to be 30 miles an hour. And I'd come down a hill and I didn't see the cars behind me, but they were drag racing. And one went to the right of me and one went to the left of me. They were easily probably going 70 miles an hour greater. Like I heard them before I saw them.
Mhm.
And that triggered me. Like I was, yeah, no, that one took me like 3 minutes to calm down. So you still have those things, but like it shifts and you can see it. The reality is the shift is within yourself,
Mhm.
right? Because when you start out, it's like you can, and the gauge would be is like if you do get angry or you feel uncomfortable while you're coming home, just remember that and then practice 6 months, 3 months, and then
Mhm.
just think back and kind of compare.
Mhm.
And you start to notice, different things. Like I actually enjoy going in traffic.
Mhm.
Like it's the weirdest thing, and I like in the book, like I am daily like creating these love portals at intersections and I just feel good.
Yeah, and that's so powerful. when we moved to this property about 2 years ago, there was an intersection just down the road, and I've always felt uncomfortable that intersection. And when we were
Mm,
looking at this house, the house at the corner by that intersection was also for sale. And we had then heard from the neighbors that that person on the corner wanted to move because they were just tired of all the accidents at that intersection.
yeah.
So I started running energy to that intersection.
Ooh.
And I think within 6 months, they made it a four-way stop because it used to just be a two-way stop and it's a country intersection. So people would just fly through. But
Yeah.
then it became a four-way stop and now it's safe.
Yeah, that gave me full tingles. And I think there's a unique thing there too, right? Like, and I love how you do that. You sent energy and you were detached. You just wanted,
Mhm,
you just were hoping
mhm,
for a solution from the universe or whatever, however you want to look at it, in a way that was for the highest good.
mhm,
And when they made that upgrade, right? Like,
mhm.
yeah, that's beautiful.
Hmm. And I mean, the thing that's driving is we're always going places. And when you become aware of it, you can set the intention and hold that energy there, bringing that love, kind of what you call it a love portal. I think it's a
Yeah,
beautiful example. And we can do this at intersections. Yeah, sending the bubbles around other cars. I mean, even our own,
yeah,
especially when I'm driving with my kids, I'll even do like one of these. And it's kind of like
I
my like,
love it.
whoop, we're wrapped up
Yep.
and ready to go. Oh, there's so many things I want to talk about. Okay, so let's talk about the sacred pause because you were kind of talking about
Mm.
even when you feel that you're getting angry when you're driving and not to get caught up on that. So let me just read this passage from your book. I love it. Maybe I'll just read the whole book. Um, you have an audio version coming out, right?
Yes, I've been busy, but yes, that is
That
my
would be
next
perfect to
coming out.
listen
Yep,
to while
yep,
driving.
yeah, exactly.
All right, so the sacred pause. This, dear traveler, is a missed opportunity. For driving is not merely a physical act, it's a dance of consciousness. It is a symphony of decisions, reactions, and a constant interplay with the world around you. To neglect this dance is to miss the music of life itself. Therefore, before you go into driving on autopilot, practice the sacred pause. Remember, friend, the journey itself is the destination. Proceed with awareness and intention, bearing in mind that the most profound discoveries often lie in not reaching the finish line, but in savoring the sacred pauses along the way.
So that story, I was talking with an Alaska airline representative and I captured it in the book and we hit it off and just the talking and all of a sudden we got to the bubbles and she's like, "Oh, I kind of do just like you, wrap it up," which is beautiful. And they went on a trip and it had like the car broke down and they were going to a wedding and it ended up her son's girlfriend came along. It ended up that she got to know her, right? And she got to do things with her sons that she'd wish she'd got to, right? She got to expose one of her sons. I think there was a circus there or something that he liked, and they slowed down. And like her son's like, "Mom, your wish to like wrap it up, it didn't work." And she's like, "No, it did. We were safe." And in that, not only were we safe, but we got to experience all of these other things, and we became closer as a family.
Mhm.
And instead of like getting, and that was one thing I said is when I was talking to her, is like she could have gotten angry and been like, "Oh, we didn't make the wedding." But she just turned it back to like, what did we really have? And she got her blessing, right? It was safe travels that were, wrapped up in like a unique adventure. And like for me, and I think this is one thing is like in the book, I talk about how when I cook, there'll be cupboards open everywhere, and I will leave them like I I just literally don't see them. But if I stop when I'm done and I look around, I see everything. And when you're driving, if you get home and you don't remember part of the drive, like it's that same thing. You've really, really missed out.
Mhm.
And when you pause along the way. Doesn't have to be all the time, but when you pause along the way, you start to see things that you've never seen before. And you're also training yourself to become very sensitive to the world in a way that you notice things, you sense things. It could be like the trees blowing, it could be a kid playing over there, but you'll notice things and like it fills your bucket up, right? Like
Mhm.
you get to the other side and you had all these wonderful micro experiences that you wouldn't have had if you would have just been like, I'm going from point A to point B. And there's another part in the book where I try to give you seeds of like how to fall back in love with driving. I think most of us were really excited when we could first drive. You know, like there's the freedom. We can go almost anywhere. For some of us, we can drive to multiple countries. We can see beautiful scenery. We can go to places that we've never been by just turning a key and going somewhere. But when we pause along the way, like it helps us savor the whole process.
Mhm.
And if we can learn to really even come back to that place where maybe it's the music that we're playing, or maybe it's the people, like we purposely choose to take a road trip with a certain friend or certain family members, right? Like we change the whole dynamics.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, we don't have to go to the movies. We don't have to watch TV. We can just hang out in the moment where we are, be it with friends, be it with the vehicle, be it with the scenery around us. Then all of a sudden, you don't need as many things on the outside world because you have enough inside already.
I love that chapter of falling in love with driving.
Mm.
And so we have our car, it's a Honda Civic, but it's standard. So we drive it like a race car and we call it a race car. And our kids are like,
Yep.
is this a race car? Absolutely, it's a race car. Um, but I was going through, I don't think there was nothing good on the radio that I liked. So I was just flipping through. My husband had a USB with a bunch of music plugged in.
Mm.
And I was going through the folders, and he had a folder of music from back when we were dating.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm listening to these songs now, and I fell in love with driving. It took me right back, and it was so exciting to then have all of those memories come up of just that time in my life. And then I found myself then running the energy to myself in those moments as those memories came up. And it just
Mm.
became this really beautiful experience. And then I thought of your book and just ways of falling in love with driving.
And I think you bring up the beautiful point is like finding what resonates with you, you know, and you found like those songs and it brought back, and then you did something else, which I have in there too, when you ran energy back to yourself in those moments.
Mhm.
Uh, I have a little section on it, but there's that beautiful thing when you can heal yourself in each and every one of those moments when you look back, right? You can have compassion on yourself. Like if you were, I don't know, if you were really a road rage driver, you can look back later and you can be like, I understand. In that moment, that was my
Mhm.
perception, and you can
Mhm.
send energy and you
Mhm.
can help heal yourself across
Mhm.
all of the
Mhm.
time. That is,
Mhm.
I love that.
Mhm.
That's beautiful.
Well, and in that time, I was working full time as an ultrasound tech, and it was a fairly long drive. Like I had anywhere between 30 and 40-minute commute then to my work. And I was that person that would rush to work. I would be that person who left with just the amount of time and praying that I can like fly into the parking lot and make it up into my office before my patient gets there without like walking into the building with my patient. But
Yep.
that was me. And so now we've created this life where I don't have that rush. I don't have to have a commute.
Mm.
So when I was driving with that music, now it was like a state of leisure. So I had
Mm.
such compassion for myself back when I was rushing in that commute and always doing that drive. So yeah, then that's why I was running energy back to myself in those moments.
I think that's a beautiful thing is when, in the same way that the other drivers, when we're talking about looking at them differently, like you want to apply that same thing to yourself,
Mhm.
you know, across your whole lifetime. And it's amazing because you can just feel it. Like it's
Mhm.
beautiful to think that at that moment in your life, there was a future version of you
Mhm.
that was running energy on you, right? Like
Mhm.
you've been taking care of yourself
Mhm.
like throughout your whole life. It's beautiful.
Mhm. So then speaking to that moment, I had an experience, and then you talk about this in your book. So I'll explain my experience and then you can kind of speak to it. So I had to go to work on Boxing Day morning, and it was freezing rain, and I was aware of the freezing rain. And this was kind of back before my awareness of energy. So I prepared to go to work in the morning. I noticed, yes, it does look like freezing rain. I'll drive carefully. It still felt like I could get to work all right. So I go to leave my door, and as I walked out my door and came around the corner to my car, I had this like split-second vision that Jesus was on one side and my brother who passed was on the other side, and that I was going to be safe. And at that time, I had never really had visions, and I was just like, that was a really weird thought. And I got into my car and I started driving. And I live in Canada, so the roads were pretty bad. I was driving maybe 40, 50 kilometers an hour when the speed limit is 80. And I had given myself the time. And thankfully, it was Boxing Day morning, not a lot of traffic. I came to a stop. I made my turn and I went to accelerate. As I accelerated, I started to spin out on black ice. So my car started fishtailing, and then I eventually spun and my back end hit a hydro pole. And I was maybe going 30, 40 kilometers, so not super fast. But hence I still totaled my car. And it was just this like, whoa, what just like it all happened so fast. And I was able to walk out of that. And doctors told me that I had whiplash and likely a concussion and I should rest. You talk about having guidance and protection on your drive. And can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah. So when I first started, asking for protection, like in addition to putting bubbles, I would put protection around people's cars. Like I'd say Archangel Michael's protection in front, behind, to the left, to the right, above, below, or other things, ask the angels. I started to notice, so I have 9 acres. There's been times like I have some like farm equipment that I've been hauling things like hay bales and other things, and it's very similar to like what you said. There was one time I was going through the intersection and the hay bales are so heavy, like you can't stop. And it was snowy out, and like I just slid all the way through the intersection. Luckily, like no one was there. Like you start to notice this bubble of protection that even if vehicles or drivers, like that one time when those two drag racers passed me, I went back to the place. I don't know how that car on the right of me, I don't see the space. I don't see how he didn't hit me. You notice occurrences like that. And then I use pendulums to help me see energy, like really fine tune energy. And I noticed in the rooms where the doorway was, when I put protection, for me at that point, my pendulum would go still, which means like there's no reading or there's spirit or source in that moment. But I couldn't, like, if I'd ask, like, show me yes, show me no, like it wouldn't move.
Mhm.
And then I got the vision, right? Like that was a protection from Archangel Michael, like almost like Star Trek, where they have the shields. Like it was
Mhm.
exactly that. And it was that protection. And then I went to other rooms where I hadn't put the protection in, and in the doorway, the pendulums worked fine. Also measured protection in bubbles around vehicles. So there's some energetic, maybe sometime in the future we'll have a gadget that you can measure it, but that energy protect, like it does something to either like deflect, and if you're like, well, maybe I don't understand, or maybe I don't have a reference point. Like if you've ever been in a room and someone comes in and it just feels off, right? Like, how could you be feeling their energy by it just being off? Even like sometimes you'll have it and you won't even see them. Like, you have to turn around and you're like, oh, someone just walked in. It's that same like level of energy. I wish I had more scientific data behind it, but in the 10 years that I've been practicing this, I've noticed that back in Minnesota with the snow and ice, I'd had a couple car accidents, but I haven't been in a car accident since I've started all of this.
Mm. Well, and the more I think about that accident, there's just so many layers to it. So the car I was driving was the first brand new car I had bought. So once I
Yep.
graduated and became an ultrasound tech, I was so proud of myself and I had bought this car and it was a silver Nissan Sentra.
Mm,
And I named the car Ames and we
love it.
had a great relationship. I loved Ames. I had my favorite music in there and he really felt like a friend. It was like, and you talk
Mm.
about naming your car too.
Yep.
And I remember when once I had the accident and I was able to get back home and my husband's asking me how I was doing, I was just so sad for Ames. And I
Mm,
just felt so terrible. And then my husband's like, yeah, but he protected you. And then
exactly.
we later found out that I was expecting. I had wondered if I was expecting.
Mm.
So I would have been around 4 weeks at the time of
Yep.
that accident. Uh, and then this is, I guess, what I believe that that concussion opened me up because that concussion was the first time I had to start saying no and I had to rest and I had to just
Mhm.
close my eyes, be in a dark room, go inward and like actually take that time for myself with an injury that's not seen. Like I feel like
Mm.
I couldn't like a concussion. I mean, the doctor's like, it's a minor concussion, but like, what does that even mean? So that
Yep.
was the first time I had to advocate for myself and rest with an unseen injury. Because people would be like, oh, you just walked out, you're fine. Um, and looking back now, I feel like I should have taken more time, but it was after that car accident that I started becoming aware. I was way more sensitive. I started becoming aware of energy. And then that was then within that year, it's what led me into quantum touch.
And this is, and I love how you demonstrated this other really like important piece is that on the spiritual path, it's not all about rainbows and unicorns,
Mhm,
right? There are times where pain, injuries,
mhm,
bad relationships, car accidents, right? They can all be our best teacher.
mhm,
And if we are in that same place, right? Like if we are open in that moment,
mhm,
you know, it's almost like we chose like could I, in a moment where someone might be really angry, could I transmute that? Or could
mhm,
I be so grateful because it taught me something, right? It
mhm,
provided me a unique thing,
mhm,
like in the same thing, like, the openness, right? And the energy and the concussion,
mhm,
right? Like that might have been the alignment and the vision of your brother in
mhm,
Jesus.
mhm,
And then that other point of like, your husband's spot on. It's like the car protected you, right? That was
mhm,
your bond, your relationship,
mhm,
and it's not a sacrifice, right? Like
mhm,
it's in a, it's a loving, compassionate thing. That was, I think you said Ames is like that was their mission, right?
mhm,
And they did what they set out to do,
mhm,
and it blessed you in so many different ways.
mhm. And then as you were saying that, it reminded me, so it was following that accident, I had seen my massage therapist, and she's the one that introduced the idea of energy and emotion stored
Mhm.
in our muscles. And she was like, Thea, you experienced a traumatic event. Don't be surprised or alarmed if you feel like you want to cry during the massage. She said, all of your emotions that were not expressed are stored in your muscles. And as I'm massaging you, that's going to come up. So just allow yourself to cry. And that was the first time someone had mentioned that to me. And I was like, what do you mean our emotions are stored in our muscles? Like, and then she had kind of explained that concept to me. And then she's like, it's really effective for people with grief. And then I was like, wait a minute. I was like, how has no one told me about this? I was like, I've been grieving for a while. And then like I just thought about my brother and I thought about my miscarriages. And I mean, needless to say, I was like bawling on the table. But she created this really beautiful space for me to connect with my body and with the energy and the emotions. And like I just think back to that accident and I don't think of it as an accident. Like it was this monumental moment.
Wow. It's so wow. in the past couple weeks, like my shoulder's been sore. Um, and there's two people that said the same thing, is that certain that like it'll store even in certain places in your body, right? And so like I've taken whatever emotion and I've stored it in my shoulder. And
Mhm.
like some of them, have abilities and they're gifted and they can see exactly where it is. They're like, oh, it's about 2 inches in, and and they're sending energy to my shoulder, and um, you're right. Like wow. Yeah, it's beautiful. And it's that same thing is like a lot of this is like, why didn't no one tell me? Like where, there's a lot of books, but they don't, not to this level, or maybe I
Mhm.
wasn't paying attention of, our body, like just like you said, it'll store emotions, hurt, trauma. And maybe I think part of that is it's into the point that you can transmute it or love it or heal it through yourself or combination of others. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And then following the accident, I had to, so a tow truck had taken my car away and it was at some sort of lot. And I had to go and just grab my personal belongings that I wanted to get out of it. And I remember that being it felt like I was going to a
Mm.
funeral. Like I just felt that grief. And I remember going to see my car and just seeing the back end was all beat up. And I remember just putting my hand on the car and just feeling those emotions. And I'm starting to feel it again
Oh,
now.
I
But
think
just,
everyone felt you right now.
yeah. But it gave me this way of grieving. And I think at that point, because I mean, when I had my brother, there was a funeral, like you could publicly grieve a brother. But with my miscarriages, it was just so personal and sacred. And I didn't have that outlet of grieving for it. So I think it just allowed me to feel those emotions. Like, because once you feel
Mhm.
grief, like it's just complicated. You're going to feel all the grief and it just
Yeah.
becomes this expression.
Oh, I might use your example if I do another version, because you bring up a really, it just clicked is I thought, what if everyone loved their car like you did,
Mhm.
right? They're not gonna do reckless things,
Mhm.
right? And they're going to protect their vehicle, and
Mhm.
just that love, infusing the car with love, right? Because then it holds it and it radiates it out, and it in its own sense creates a protective bubble. Like
Mhm.
the world would be totally different if everyone loved their vehicles to the level that you did
Mhm.
and do. Yeah.
Mhm. I
Wow.
believe my brother, it was a Fast and a Furious movie where one of the
Yeah.
cars was named Eleanor, and he decided to name the farm truck Eleanor. And then ever
Mm.
since then, we've always just named our vehicles. So we still do. The minivan is Maria, and our car is Carol. They've been great for us. And the kids will call them by their names too.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
and I
Oh, that
really
is.
loved your illustrations in the book.
Mm.
And those have become such beautiful talking points for my kids because my kids
Mm.
love to just flip through your book and see the pictures. The way you show the energy bubbles around people and cars, and the image that always stands out to them and they giggle, but it's the teapot. It's that boiling kettle of that car, and it just represents the anger of that driver. But then it became this really beautiful, like when we're driving, are you noticing boiling cars, like boiling kettle
Yeah.
cars? And can you send love to them? So like my kids
Oh,
pointed
wow.
out, or they it changes the way we think about driving. And then I explained the concept of rage to them, right? That it's not personal, that that person is attacking you. It's just you become that object. And it really helped them to understand and not take things personally.
Mm. Well, that's so many tingles. And then it's right. And there's that, like, this is that one kind of key piece is how amazing is it that you've shifted the next generation,
Mhm.
right? Like, imagine being 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and you see these teapots, and now you notice people that are getting angry, and instead of having a parent in the front seat who's cussing them out, right? you have a guide, a mentor in your parents, and in a way that now they can kind of giggle, or
Mhm.
they can at least be compassionate too, like, oh, that person might be having a bad day. Let me send them a bubble,
Mhm.
right? So that means that in the future, when they are driving
Mhm.
and someone does something that could upset them, they're going to calm down. They're going to like
Mhm.
have this intuitive, sacred pause. They're going to
Mhm.
send a bubble. They're going to back away,
Mhm.
and it's going to, like, statistically, just those actions alone, without all the spiritual stuff, they're going to be in less accidents,
Mhm.
and their stress is going to be lower, right? So they're going to live longer. And
Mhm.
then there's all the other, like, spiritual aspects of how it actually really makes a difference, how energetically it entwines, since we're all energy.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then it passes on, because
Mhm.
then I should say, then your grandchildren and my grandchildren,
Mhm.
right? Their parents are already that way. It'll
Mhm.
just be the way of life.
Mhm.
It'll be all that they've known. And you just
Mhm.
pass it down the generations. And so
Mhm.
you ripple this love throughout the future
Mhm.
generations.
Yeah. And that's why I love your book, because you're putting these energetic, these spiritual principles to something that is so relatable and accessible. And driving, I mean, you're in your little micro world, and then you can have these conversations, and it
Mm.
gives beautiful examples and ways of practicing.
Mm. Wow. That's a really interesting, right? The part of, like, when I was growing up, there wasn't the cell phones and all the distractions.
Mhm.
But with when our kids are with us, the car does create that micro bubble, right? It creates unique teaching opportunities
Mhm.
that they might say they're stuck with us. Um, but in those moments, right? Like, it makes a big difference. And the kid, my kids have been open, like, my son helps me send bubbles, and my daughter helps open up portals, and she'll sense into someone. I'll be like, what do you feel on this car? And then based on that, we can, maybe send a bubble or something. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And then that kind of leads in, because then you end with talking about
Mm,
unconditional love. And the way you explain it is so beautiful, but the part is, can I love them as they are? And that is the part that resonated with me. Can I love myself as I am? Can I love my kids as they are? My husband? And it just was so humbling to then imagine, what does that feel like? So I really appreciated that, and how you add that then to driving and the drivers is, can I love them as they are?
In the email that you'd sent me, one of the questions with that was like, why did I add that? It was actually beautiful, because it just hit me, because I remember kind of wondering the same. But when you pose the question is, why did I add the section on unconditional love? Is that actually, when I took a moment to pause, the whole book is really about unconditional love. From the name it to tame it, right? You, instead of getting angry at that other person, you're turning inwards.
Mhm.
And it's like a baby step to unconditional love. Sending a bubble around someone else that just cut you off or endangered your family, right? You are saying that, you know what? I'm not sure what's going on in your life, but I love you just as you are, right? I accept you just as you are.
Mhm.
And, I know personally, there's this thing of, or this desire or hope to be loved, but it really is like to be loved in a divine way, right? To be accepted for just who I am.
Mhm.
And when I look back from your question, right, it put me from a different perspective, as I got to look at the end, right? And that's what, like, all of the seeds and stuff are unique ways for you to look differently, to love yourself just as you are, to accept yourself just as you are. Because if you can accept someone and send a bubble to someone else that just cut you off, why can't you accept yourself when you're 15 and you did something that you still feel maybe ashamed or bad about, right? Now you're from a standpoint and like you run energy back to yourself. Now you're from a stand or from a point where you can love every moment of yourself just as you were along the whole way. And then you heal that way. And then you can turn and you can love others. That's what people are searching for, right? They want to be accepted as they are. So they don't have to be someone that they're not,
Mhm.
right? They don't have to like impress you, right? Like it is so I don't know, it's so warming and so humbling to be in a place where someone can just say, you know what? I love you just as you are. I accept you just as you are. And I love the way that you make this universe unique by the presence of just who you are. It's a really good place for me to be.
I love that. Now we met at Becoming More in Cancun, and then we both went to Becoming More in Florida, so we got to reunite too. How did Quantum Touch, how did Becoming More, how does that play into your story?
There's a piece of me which I'll say is like the Bodhisattva. And the piece of the Bodhisattva is when I'm in that place where I can, at least in a moment, love myself unconditionally and I can love others unconditionally. I will share that with the whole universe, with infinity, through that abundance, overflowing love. I'll share that. In Cancun, water has been teaching me. And water to that point had taught me about how I could see anger in water, I could see gratitude in water, and I could see love in water. And at that point, love, like, and I'd done presentations like at a spiritualist church. And when people put love into water, it kind of aligned in the same way for me, which was kind of what I'd call now is maybe conditional love, which is still a healthy love, right? Love with boundaries. I was sitting at the table when we first had dinner before the event. And, of course, for me, I had a pendulum with me and I was demonstrating how water can teach us. One of the guys there, I had asked him, he put anger into water, gratitude into water, and when he put love into water, it did something different. And I was so curious because I was like, what kind of love did you put in? And he said, unconditional love, of course. And this gets back to what we were just talking about is like, okay, actually, it goes back to a couple points of what we were talking about. I hadn't been able to demonstrate that myself. So the next morning, I had breakfast and I'm sitting there with water in front of me. And I was thinking, what have I done in my life that might have energetically created unconditional love or sent it? And I'd been in a rough relationship and I tried different things. And there was one point where during an argument, I sent, well, and like they made it clear that they didn't like any of my energy stuff and I should never send it to them. And so I respected that out of their free will. But what I did is I sent unconditional love or love to their higher self, and that it was that I love them no matter what. And that when they are ready to receive, that their higher self would deliver it to themselves. And I put that into the water. And at that point, for me, it went back and forth and it matched what he had for unconditional love. And then that really shifted me because here's a point where I could see the beauty in having a struggling relationship because it is really maybe there's an easier path. But maybe this was the easiest path. It was through that path that I was given an opportunity to stand in the fire and still send love. And it is only in that moment that I was able to be in a moment of sending unconditional love. Now, I don't have to always be on fire now, but it was through that teaching that I was in a place where now I understood the energy
Mhm.
in a way. And in Florida, on the second one, I demonstrated it to a couple people, and maybe this is how the universe works, but I bumped into more people that naturally send unconditional love, um, across that. And then that's even opened me up to even a further thing of like divine or infinite love, where recently, kind of after I wrote the book, there's this concept that unconditional love is a directional love. Now, I send it to you no matter what, and maybe it is across all your lifetimes or this lifetime, all the way back to when you're born, whatever you're comfortable with. And that radiates unconditional love, like it's a spotlight of no matter what. And then the next one that I've learned about is the infinite love, and that would be is that, say I look at you right now and I love you no matter what, but I use that same Bodh Safa thing, is that then I radiate out that love and admiration of you just as you are to all infinity. And that demonstrates like a divine love, that there's no place that that love doesn't exist now. If it wasn't for becoming more, like I probably wouldn't have bumped into guides and mentors that way. And then becoming more also, there's this other part that's just beautiful. Like I can't recommend it more for anyone that wants to share, is this concept of sharing. It's like we all have, and it's back to that part again of you loving someone just as they are. We all have our unique abilities. And in this circle where we come together is that we openly share our gifts, as long as it's like for someone else's highest level of their highest good. That part, right? It's not like you're not charging. Since then, it's given me the ability, like when I close my eyes, I can see 360, like behind me and
Mhm.
around me. My sensitivity, like before then, I hadn't gotten visions, and I've had, visions since then. My ability to see more clearly has been enhanced. It's all gifts that others have shared with me. Let's go back to like, I don't know, like I'll say our inner children, or just imagine us. We're on this playground, we're 5 and 6, right? We're not charging the other person $1 million for this gift, right?
Mhm.
We're openly sharing
Mhm.
our uniqueness
Mhm.
with others. And then it just like, it feels like it intertwines all of us. Not that we weren't intertwined. It just makes this beautiful world. And then, the last part is like yourself and others. Like I've met some of the most amazing people that even like last weekend I had a Zoom with another person. And a couple weeks ago I had another Zoom. And like I'm still meeting and talking. And then there's one other place, which is really um, one of my friends from a different, it's actually just an online gaming circle. His daughter was born premature.
Mhm.
And within the Florida and Cancun group are, from my opinion, are some of the most compassionate, humble helpers, healers in the world. And so I reached out to all of them to send energy to, his daughter while she was, still in intensive care. And like 3 weeks later, she's already at home
Mhm.
and doing well. And like, what a beautiful place in the world where we come together and we're able to help and send love and run energy
Mhm.
to others. I
Mhm.
don't know, like it's changed me from the inside out. I'm so grateful for both of those sessions and the sharing. The people that I've met there still continue to.
Yeah, and like I agree. So quantum touch at first to me felt like like an energy healing modality where you would go to a practitioner, you would receive an energy healing, but it quickly became this way of sensing energy,
Mm,
becoming aware of the vibration, becoming like a daily necessity and a practice that I would use daily. And it opened me up to so many abilities. And I think that's also why I love becoming more, because
Mhm.
you're in training and sharing gifts, and it continues to open me up to these abilities. And even like you said, with your friend and sending to his daughter, and Richard Gordon shares this about becoming more. It's the workshop that never ends because we're always entangled. And we have that WhatsApp group chat where we still get to stay in connection with each other. And it's so beautiful. And I think so. I want to talk about your training for psychic and mediumship, because I mean, opening up to our psychic abilities is just like a side effect of learning quantum touch if you're open to
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
So, how did that start for you?
Yeah. So I went to a spiritualist church. I was nudged to go, from the other side. And a couple weeks into it, I started getting messages that, hey, your abilities would come in. And so I thought I'd be able to talk to dead people and all of this, but then I started seeing energy. And then the universe sent me amazing mentors. There's these other circles where, I'm learning and growing and helping others. Joseph Shield has, and he's a very humble guy, and like I'd recommend, like, he has trial stuff. You can see if it resonates with you. But he's been doing this for a long time, and he's like super grounded in the way that he tells you, like, he wants you to be, authentic, not to scam anyone, right? Because there's people that will, but he teaches you like all the hard things. And then there's the other part, which is you get the opportunity to practice safely. I think it's very scary and intimidating to, when you start to sense energy, is to sense it on other people in a safe place. Like, you know, probably not gonna, well, probably unless you're on a TV show, you're not gonna go up to someone in a grocery store and say, hey, I see energy on you. And so the psychic part of the first training, and it's really outside my comfort zone. Like, I've read books before, and I was always like, oh, while I read books, I never connected in a way that I could. Psychic and energy reading and energy sensing, they're really the same thing. I think that was something that surprised me a little bit, is like this, like we have the Zoom going right now, and they have breakout rooms. And there was one time before a breakout where all of a sudden, we do like a little meditation, and like all this energy hit me in a really like unique way. And I got a presence of like a father figure and like heavy kind of chest stuff. And then I had asked the question, like, was the father still alive? And I got yes. And there's this part where it's not you. And I think this is the hard thing, is that psychic energy reading, is that for me, I'm at a place where I know it's not me, it's flowing through me. Like, I couldn't know any of this. And the gal comes in, and then all of a sudden I was like, instead of like delivering the message, right? I got wishy-washy because the gal was easily like late 70s, 80s, something like that. So there's like no way your father's alive. And so then I asked her, like, is your father alive? And it was yes. Like, her father was actually alive. And then there's that other interesting thing, is like, for some people, psychic stuff, like for me, I do get messages for people that are alive. Maybe it's coming through a higher self. I don't know how it all works. And sure enough, he does have like chest troubles. And so, but for me, it was all sense, right? Like, I could feel it in my body,
Mhm.
right? In the same way that when I'm practicing running energy, right, or running energy for someone locally or remote, like, I can feel it running through my body, or it's directly coming through source. But even if it's directly coming through source, I still feel it running through my body. And then it's like what you said, is like, after your accident, all of a sudden, like, your whole body, inner and out, become a canvas. And I think there's the other part, which I really like, some of the circles I'm in and the Joseph Shield training, is this part of that each of us are unique. And I'm not, at least right now, I'm not someone that does a lot of like message channeling,
Mhm.
or like, someone's father or mother comes in, like I'll sense something, but I'm not like getting messages
Mhm.
that way. So it's my unique way of that. And I think that can be a little bit scary. It's like, okay, why aren't I? No, it's back to loving yourself just as you are. And then
Mhm.
there's this other piece that I see now is that when I'm unique and you're unique, when we come together, just like we do through the becoming more or any of these circles, right? We actually like multiply, like that 1 + 1 = infinity. Maybe there's a part like your connection with cars and naming, right? Like I probably tap in, I might call you up. It's like, hey, here's my car. What do you sense as a name,
Mhm.
right? And so like we can partner together. And I do,
Mhm.
and there's also the other part is like I might be seeing it this way. I can ask someone else who has different abilities to look at it and look at it with a different set of eyes. It's also helped me. And the other thing that I've noticed, since I have the ability to see energy on people, is that when people are really psychic, their energy will fill out a room. They do it in different ways, and people that are taking this training, I can help their confidence because a lot of them are questioning, like, is this me? Is
Mhm.
this real? Because maybe you get a great message one day and you don't the next, and you're like, and there was one gal who was just about to give it up, and she asked for 3 signs and she got all those signs. And then when she gave me a reading, like I could see everything. She was spot on for my reading, and I could see, like, for me, it would be like, oh, that's a way to think of it. Is like, imagine there's a fog in the room, right? So I can kind of see this fog, and that fog encompasses, like, if it not only is in yours, but it'll come into here in the Zoom, and I'll feel their presence here, which allows them to kind of entangle with me, which enables them to read me. And so it's one way that I've seen that, and that's helped a lot of people rebuild their confidence. So it's definitely scary for me. There's just this beautiful thing is like for other people, that message, well, it might not mean anything to me. It's a great confirmation for them
Mhm.
that their practices are being seen outside of them
Mhm.
and that they are making a difference in the world. And that's kind of what I like is that part of like, and, the best messages are the ones I could never predict, right? Like I would never predict that a gal in her 80s that her father's alive. So that's the place that I'm exploring and trying to improve, all with the hope of just, helping others.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I feel like it also comes with working with the energy. I know I have developed so much with quantum touch, and we work with unconditional love. And because we work with unconditional love, and in that way, I don't feel scared. Because I
Ooh,
remember I was talking to a girlfriend
yep,
about this, and she's a nurse, and she often feels energy when she's working with her patients. And she told me it's really interesting, and she's like, Thea, I wish I could do it too, but I'm scared. I just don't even want to go there. I don't want to open up something I don't want to deal with. And I thought about that. And of course, I talked to my husband. He's like, yeah, a lot of people are scared. Like they don't want to do that. And I was just
yep,
like, whoa, like I shouldn't say I never felt that scared, but I've always felt this like grounding love, like moving forward, that I think has allowed me to just dive into it. And it does give confirmation. I don't see energy, like seeing colors on people, but it's just like this knowing.
yep.
And it's developing because, like, I'll give an example. I was working with a client and I kept getting the image of my grandma. And I was like, does this represent a maternal figure for him? So I was asking something like about your grandma, and he's like, no, that doesn't resonate. And then we kind of ended it. And then he was talking about how it's his birthday this weekend. So he was telling me his plans. And then I was like, oh my goodness, my grandma's birthday would have been on
Mhm.
Saturday. So I'm like, I was energetically picking up that he was thinking about his birthday. And for me, that day is represented by my grandma. So I could see how I was picking it up, but I wasn't interpreting it correctly. So then it just made
Yep.
me think about, I guess, just being curious. Like when those ideas just like pop into my mind, and maybe you'd have advice on like how do you navigate? Because I like it's so natural, and I think we're all capable of this.
And I think you had the answer in there, and it was something so the answer is that you keep practicing, you keep running the energy. I got a message at church, and Joseph Shield, or it wasn't, it was another psychic event, but I think I've got it twice now. And Joseph Shield talks about this is that your whole lifetime is a canvas for source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, messages, the current to come through you. And they'll use everything in you, kind of like they have a whole, I guess, technically, like they know all the videos that have ever played in your life, and they
Mhm.
can pull up a video or a sense or a sensation, and you then connect it. And then as you practice, you will take notes mentally or however you take notes. You'll be like, oh, every time this happens, right? And you
Mhm.
kind of have to practice, right? Like you have to have that safe spot to be able to practice because then you start to notice, and
Mhm.
I'll ask questions. Like
Mhm.
when I've given messages, it's like, does that resonate because that helps me guide because sometimes they'll say no and just like that then I'll have to figure out like okay what how does it actually connect and
Mhm.
I've learned a lot from that and then you brought up another point too earlier is like you have a knowing like I think that's another key piece here is that there's so many different ways. Like some people will get in knowing. Some people will see visually. Some people will have words. Some people will get visions. Some people will feel it on their bodies. Some people will get the combination
Mhm.
of all of those. It's just the way, right? It's your radio station. It's the way that it comes in.
Mhm.
It's the way that you're wired to receive those
Mhm.
messages. So you don't need it in a different way.
Mhm.
It's your way and it's your language. And then as you learn your language, you can become more and more attuned to deciphering, like there's not many books out there on energy reading. Like I had to kind of notice people that were psychic and see that not
Mhm.
everyone
Mhm.
has the energy that way or like different
Mhm.
combinations. And so like there's still a lot of learning. Like even if you have the abilities, you bring up a great point
Mhm.
even if you were blessed tomorrow with all these new abilities, you still have to learn the language
Mhm.
in a way that it makes sense. And the other side or whatever, they're going to use everything,
Mhm.
g- what you might call good or bad, struggles or love. They're going to use all of it because it is a beautiful canvas for you to understand where that other person might be. Like you might have had a situation which you're like, this is really weird. I don't understand. And then 6 months later, you kind of get this sense or intuition and they're connected. Like
Mhm.
you saw this so that you can help someone over here. It's like that pausing, right? Like it all
Mhm.
gets back to that is you become really sensitive and you're pausing along the way because everything in itself is some type of information. It's
Mhm.
some type of energy and the more in tune that you practice, you bring up a great point. Like you can take, like for me, I'd say take photos of friends or be with friends and family and just send them energy. And you can think of it as like a pipe, right? The more you send energy, the more it grows, the more clean it is, and it's the easier. And as those things happen, it kind of opens you up. Like it doesn't have to be tomorrow, but maybe it's 6 months from now when you're ready. And I understood, like I've read a lot of psychic books a long time ago, and I was like, I tried all of it and it didn't work for me. I just didn't understand the language that I had.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you want to know how I receive the most messages?
Yes, I would love to
It's
know.
that moment when I'm so pissed off or triggered with my husband and my kids, and I just want to like snap at them. If I take the pause and I hear what I want to like scream at them, that is the message for me. Oh my goodness, it's so
Oh,
humbling. And I just, I've
mm,
now been able to take that pause and realize, okay, Thea, this message is for you. But it comes through so clearly. Like that moment I just want to scream at them. I'm like, oh.
yeah. And that is like, that's that beautiful, humble piece of all of this, right? Is that it might not come in the way that you expected.
Mhm.
And when you are
Mhm.
open to it, because like for me, it actually makes sense because in that moment, you've energetically charged your whole self. And then what you've done is you've paused and now you're open to the flow.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the messages will flow in. And
Mm-hmm.
so you could probably do the same thing, right? Like you could just find another way to energetically charge yourself
Mm-hmm.
and then pause. And I bet you could get messages in other ways too. But
Mm-hmm.
it is, you're right. And
Mm-hmm.
like that might not be for someone else, but as you're open and you start to notice just like that, right? Oh, I see that. Right. And it's beautiful. And that's
Yeah.
what, that's my way to encourage others, just, like through your guidance is
Mm-hmm.
find the way that resonates with you. Don't try to be
Mm-hmm.
like anyone else, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
love you just as you are. Be
Mm-hmm.
who you are, right? And that's all that's needed.
Mm-hmm. And then as you were talking about how moments connect each other, and I think I had mentioned this to you in Florida. So I think it was 9 years ago or 10 years ago in our first home, we had a series of floods in the basement, and then my husband decided to take on this bathroom
Yep.
creation.
Yep.
The existing bathroom in our basement was literally a toilet and a closet. Like it was
Yep.
pretty shoddy. So
Yep.
once we had the floods, my husband's like, you know what? Let's just open this up. We'll make it a full bathroom. And he's YouTube self-learned. And
Yep.
he's like,
Those are
yep,
the best. Love it.
I could do this. Probably take me a couple months. And I was like, okay, right? Newly married. I don't know. Um, I mean, long story short, the bathroom probably took almost 2 years. And I was really resentful for him because I'm like, you lied to me. Like you said it was just going to take a couple of months and now it's taking so long. And why are you spending all your time on the bathroom and not me? Like, oh my
Yep.
gosh, we could have been gentler to each other during that time. And sure enough, is it December or January, in our current home, the bathtub overflowed, or there was a leak in it and it had flooded down in through the living room. So now suddenly we're put into this bathroom renovation again. And both of us just kind of go into this dread of like, oh my gosh, we have to do another bathroom renovation together. But it was just this redemption moment. Like it felt like in each stage of it, I was able to send the love to ourselves in that moment,
Mm.
in the previous time. And it was just such a beautiful bond. And there was so much healing then in that. And I mean, this one went a lot quicker. I think we got it done in like 2 months, right down to even like I remember helping him cut all the tiles and piece all the tile work together in the shower in the first one. And then
Yep.
when we were doing it in now, it just that act of doing that together brought back all of those memories. And I feel like that was just such a beautiful experience. It was just so humbling.
Mm. So when you write your relationship book, because right, like if we take what you just said, there'd be a lot of people that would be absolutely triggered and they would bring like they would overlay or even amplify, right? They'd make something from 3 years ago or 7 years ago twice as bad as it really was.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then it would just blow up. But
Mhm.
like you come into this moment and you're doing this beautiful transformation.
Mhm.
And you also see, which is really hard to learn, right? Or even get to a point that when something comes up and you're triggered sometimes later, it actually means that I'll use one of the buzzwords at a higher vibration, or maybe I'll use a different word. You're ready.
Mhm.
When something triggers you, you're actually at a point that you're ready and you're given an opportunity to look at it differently. And
Mhm.
that is exactly what you're doing. And that's like one of the hardest things. And then you not only do that, like you do the platinum version is then you send love all the way back and you
Mhm.
heal all of it. And you're left with this thing of being like, oh my God, the 2 year bathroom scenario might have been one of the best things to ever happen in our relationship because we came together and we
Mhm.
we grew together in a place that now you can see it from all different perspectives. It was just
Mhm.
beautiful.
Mhm. Mhm. And I mean, that is one of the things I love about quantum touch is it gives us this simple tool because life is a ceremony. And you
Mhm.
kind of mentioned this earlier, our relationships are going to mirror it all to us. So when we can have that sacred pause and
Yeah.
just be present in our relationships, because what we see in that person, in that driver, is a reflection of what we're experiencing.
And then when you pause and you do this great job, is like you just keep sending love back to all those other versions of yourself. It ripples.
Mhm.
And I don't know, like I had that moment recently where it was like, it was so humbling to think that there's this version of me that keeps sending love to me all the
Mhm.
way back.
Mhm.
All the way back when I'm 5, 6, like someone's always been there protecting me
Mhm.
and loving me just as I am, right? And that's just myself. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that, and that doesn't include all the other friends and family
Mhm.
of people that, love me as I am.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
wow.
exactly. And just like how with the Becoming More group, we have that WhatsApp group and we're
Mm,
posting of who needs energy and the group then sends, or even in the level 1 workshop, when we get to the distant healing, everyone gets to pick someone. And as a group, we send energy to them. And during one of those moments, it hit me. I was like, somebody could be sending energy to me right now. Somebody else. And if we all did this, like, we're all receiving this energy and this love, and it really does become this infinite thing. And I'm so grateful for this awareness. And then in that way, I feel guided moving forward. So when I get that vision or that idea of inspiration, it's not just a thought or a want, it's being shown to me what is to come. Or um, in the same way, when I become aware of someone and what they're doing, it almost becomes this confirmation of what is to come.
yeah. That's a thing that, 1 + 1 = infinity. And that's a place where I've been practicing a lot is this place of, sending all my abundance infinitely out. And
Mhm.
there's others that are doing it. And
Mhm.
there's others that are sending it directly to you,
Mhm.
And so you have all of this. And
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
changes us,
Mhm.
right? Or it helps us
Mhm.
remember. Like that's a lot of like sending out. But when you do that, like for me, I personally, I just feel it in my heart. Like every time I do it, it changes me. I think this is the core thing is like, be it the mediumship, be it the psychic, all this, like at its simplest thing, it's just like, the quantum touch level 1. It is all sending energy. And it is this part or this path where you come into knowing that when you're sending energy, it is really impacting
Mhm.
yourself
Mhm.
and others.
Mhm.
And when you do that, then all of a sudden, this physical world we have becomes an energetic world because it breaks down. It's like, how can I just take a thought and it can impact someone? How can I take a thought and the water energy changes? How can we collectively come together and an ailment that doctors had tried to help goes away in a second? And then all of a sudden the world becomes magical. And this a loving, magical way is that it keeps reflecting back all these things to us in a way that enables us to learn, enables us to share and grow. That, yeah,
Mhm. I mean, your book is sending energy to other drivers. And I just think of myself the morning before my car accident, when I was walking to my car and I had that sudden vision that Jesus was on one side and my brother was on the other, and that I was going to be safe. And then I just think, well, who sent that energy to me?
yeah,
I mean, that was before my awareness of energy. I would have explained that from a Christian view. Maybe someone was praying for me. And I mean,
yeah,
it's the same. It's
yeah.
that sending that energy. It's like in that way, I can look back and I can see the way I've been protected. And then that also gives me the faith moving forward that I will continue to be protected and guided.
You just so feel it, right? It comes to
Mhm.
this place of like you use the word knowing, which I like, is like you have a knowing. You
Mhm.
just know you're going to be protected,
Mhm.
right? And that doesn't mean that your finger's not going to get stubbed or something, but it's in a way that it's really is for your highest good. And it's just beautiful.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's so
Mhm.
humbling. It is. I'm super grateful the universe works this way.
Mhm.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us. I love this conversation and Here is the book. I will have all the links below so that you can order his book and try it out. And oh, one last thing. You talk in your book about blessing the book, and I could feel
Oh,
it. It came like I could feel it. And like right away, my kids were drawn to it. And you invite everyone to bless the book so that everyone
yeah.
reading the book would feel it and it would ripple out.
Yeah, there's a couple. Where is it? Let me find it quick. So I saw this also when I was doing the book. I was energetically measuring all the photos before it was blessed, and there's a YouTube channel that I was watching, and someone they were channeling, and there Jesus came in, and it was right when I was measuring this, and Jesus had given the guidance is that everyone listening to the YouTube channel, right, is that they bless and that they infuse that channel, right? And it was exactly what I was writing. And so, yeah, so here I say, as you turn each page, or listen to every word, I warmly invite you to join me in a collective endeavor to raise the energy of this blessed book. I've had a lot of earth angels and others bless the book, but as we all collectively do it, and like as we've been having this interview, I've been sending energy and infusing, out to everyone, and so please infuse the book with your unconditional love, maybe divine love, allowing it to ripple outward to every reader, and from there extend further to drivers across the globe. And you had mentioned earlier, there's one I want to bring up. Let's see, where are you? Here it is. So the tea
Mm.
kettle is actually blessed in a very unique way. It is that initially you feel the anger, and then a couple seconds later, it actually calms you down in a way that you can be playful with it. And so like when your kids see that, right? Like at first you can kind of sense the anger, and then it becomes humorous. And then your kids did exactly that, right? Is they were able to playfully make it a
Mhm.
game of love and in helping others.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. And yeah, I'll have all of the information listed below.
Thank you very much, Dave.